Please enjoy this encore presentation of The Way Home.
Welcome to The Way Home with Laura Smith, the show that brings you wonderful guests, helpful advice, and uplifting stories. The Way Home. Live inspired. Here's your host, Laura Smith.
Happy Easter, everyone. I'm so grateful today to have a wonderful friend who is also, he was the head minister at a very unique church in New York City for almost a decade, the Marble Collegiate Church. It's like the oldest congregation on the island of Manhattan. And he was the senior minister there. I used to go and see him all the time, but now he teaches in universities. He does specials on Christ on television. He does PBS wonderful series about living a loving and purposeful life. Dr. Michael Brown is going to join me for my special Easter edition Sunday today. I'm so grateful for that. And on that note, we are going to come back on the way home. Don't go away.
Hi, here's a minute of purpose, improving your life 60 seconds at a time. We're all trying to leave a lighter footprint these days. Here are some super easy tips to work into your life. 1. Tote your own reusable water bottle to cut down on plastic waste. Same goes for reusable food containers for restaurant leftovers. 2. Upcycle clothes that aren't fit for donation. Turn them into bags, braided rugs, pillowcases, quilts, stuffed toys, and more. If you're not the crafty type, donate the materials to someone who is. 3. Compost your kitchen waste. Use a countertop container to collect fruit and veggie peelings, eggshells, and coffee grounds. Cover with a little bit of soil and give it a few months. Use it on houseplants or garden plantings. Even just one of these small changes will help protect the planet. This has been your Minute of Purpose. Find more at nowwithpurpose.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Way Home with Laura Smith. Here's Laura.
Happy Easter, everyone. What a special day it is for so many of us, celebrating the holiest, one of the holiest of days all year. Easter is one of my all-time favorites. I love the theme around everything that we grew up learning about the life of Christ and then his subsequent crucifixion, which ended up as a happily ever after in the sense that, again, he was risen. So it's always been such a hopeful and beautiful day in my heart. And I wanted to honor that by having someone who is close to me in my heart as well, someone who I truly admire and who changed my life when I walked into a church where he was the senior minister many years ago when I walked into the church, but he remained there for almost a decade in New York City at one of the oldest congregations in America, which was the Marble Collegiate Church on 27th and 5th Avenue. And Dr. Michael Brown was such an inspiration when I went to church this one Easter Sunday, probably a decade ago, that I subsequently stayed in touch with him. One of the most erudite, interesting, profound, and incredible teachers, not only of the life of Christ and theology, religion and such, but just on the beautiful themes of God and religion, that of love and living a purpose, love-filled life. He has so many credits and books and TV specials now under his hat. He's truly ubiquitous because he's traveling everywhere as a preacher now, based in the South in North Carolina, but he travels around to other churches and he does motivational speaking in addition to preaching in various churches. He's got a couple of books coming out, which we'll talk about because they both sound completely fascinating. And he's just a light in the world. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Michael Brown, for being on the show today. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, Laura, and thank you for inviting me. It's always a joy being with you.
Yeah, the first time I saw you was when I walked into that unbelievable, beautiful church in Manhattan. It's the church where Norman Vincent Peale was a preacher for 52 years, I believe it was.
Right.
Yes. And so I was drawn to it because of that, because I was a huge fan of his and his wonderful magazine, Guidepost magazine, and just loved his beautiful message. And in the middle of Manhattan, it was really a beacon of light. And when I went to the service, which was, I believe, an Easter service many years ago, you were preaching there. And I was captivated. I was inspired. I had tears of joy. It was just the most beautiful service that I could have imagined. And little did I know that you were so approachable, so kind in the vast middle of Manhattan. So we're talking thousands of people who would come to hear you every Sunday morning, and yet you would become a great friend just because you are so open to everyone. And I became a huge fan and started going back to that church ever so often. So here we are all these years later, I now in Indiana, you in North Carolina, far away from Manhattan. But nevertheless, you are doing so many wonderful things, and it makes me grateful that people get to really hear the things that you teach and can learn so much from your messages. So it's Easter Sunday, and you being the preacher that you are, what is your probably most favorite thing about Easter, and what does it mean to you when you do preach on an Easter Sunday? What is the message that you like to dwell upon?
Well, Laura, there are a couple of prongs of the fork. One is the theological, the biblical, the strictly religious. And at that point, if we're dealing with it, it's just this is the launch pad of Christianity, the largest faith in the world, well over 2 billion people currently, and throughout the last 20 centuries, and a faith like many other of the great global faiths that's changed the world. Without Easter, there is no Christianity. There's no Christmas. There's no anything else. Jesus would just have been yet another fairly popular blip on the screen for a brief period of time. So everything hinged on the resurrection. That's the religious side. The other side, where I think it connects with us in our life, in our journey, in our experience, is that Easter is a profound reminder of the gift of fresh starts and second chances. That even when it seems to be over, it's not always over. Dr. Pill, you mentioned him, he used to say, it's always a little too early to give up. And Easter's a good reminder of that when you come to what appears to be the absolute end of the rope, you're really not. There's something around the next corner if you just hang on, tie a knot and hang on to the end of the rope, because something yet is coming. That's a great Easter message for us, is not to give up. We have a future.
We do have a future. I think that's an incredible way to look at it. What is so interesting, though, about the Easter trajectory of Jesus, and how just when you thought it was completely over, and every time you watch it on some iteration on a movie about the depiction of the crucifixion and such, you do have this incredible sense of elation, knowing that after that whole sadness, 3 days later, he's arisen. And then you think that's the end of this story, right? But then he appears to his loved ones, his beloved disciples, to Mary Magdalene. He appears to them again. So then you think that's maybe the end of the story, because now he's going to be alive again and walking amongst us. But then yet again, he ascends. And so there's not only is there a second chance, but it seems to be a third, fourth, and fifth, and it goes on eternally.
One of the neat things, Laura, when you I teach some now, and I teach my students about this, that each of the Gospels tells the story, the birth story, the death story, and some of the life story in different ways, because of the time when they were written, the perspective and worldview of the author, the audience to whom he was writing. Luke, for example, has Jesus appearing primarily, at least initially, to outsiders. Luke's whole gospel is written to people who feel like they were on the outside looking in. It starts out with a teenage unwed mom and her soon-to-be husband getting shut out of the inn and having to have a baby in a cave. The whole announcement of that being made to third shift shepherds who were the lowest of the low. And then the whole Gospel of Luke, for example, is about Jesus' love for lepers and prostitutes and thieves and Samaritans. Well, at the very end, the resurrection, who does he appear to? He appears to a couple of guys going on a road from Jerusalem, one of whom is never even named. They're not disciples. They're not anybody. But in Luke, it's a way of saying, hey, this isn't for the religious hierarchy. This isn't for the seats of power. This story is for us all. Mark never has him appear at all. The women go to the tomb, it's empty, and the angel says, go to Galilee, and there you'll see him. What happened in Galilee? He healed the paralytic, he healed the blind, he blessed marriage at Cana, he raised the Jairus' daughter back to life. In Galilee, he was out there loving and helping people who felt alone and frightened and couldn't help themselves. So that Easter message, unlike, say, Luke, which is, if you feel like an outsider, you're not, the Mark message is, if you want to experience the risen Jesus, don't just hang around waiting for something miraculous. Go out there where people are in pain, where they cannot help themselves, where they're hungry, where they're sleeping beneath bridges, where they're abused, where they're suffering as a result of bigotry, fill in the blank. And when you help people, then you experience the risen power. So, we read the four Gospels, and they're all profoundly different. But when you merge them together, what an exciting message Easter becomes,
It is. And boy, I haven't heard it described quite like that before. But isn't that, that is your personal gift that I know about you, watching you minister and preach many, many Sundays. Captivating was one of the words that I used when I was describing you. And that was the thing that kept me going back, because a lot of times I would like to try different churches just to hear what their messages were. But I kept going back to Marble Collegiate when you were there, because I always felt that I got something that I could take with me into my week and actually incorporate into my day or into my thinking, into my heart. And so that became, I have a feeling that maybe you have some freshmen there that are just doing a required course in surfing the web and, doing Twitter while they're taking your class, but they're hearing you. And I am absolutely certain that some of them thought they were going in there just to fill a requirement, but they were leaving there somewhat transformed enough to be interested to take more. You are that kind of a teacher, a person, and a preacher. Dr. Brown, it is so very true, because it happened to me. I wasn't as young as a college student, but when I started listening to you, you have a couple of books coming out right now. You're not busy at all, but just a couple of books. And one's going to be coming out this year, correct? A Long Ago Birth in a Right Now World. Tell us about it.
That is a collection of stories about the birth narratives of Christ from the four Gospels. So what I do is take each of the Gospel authors, describe who they were, when they wrote, to whom they wrote, why they wrote, and then launch into how that shaped and crafted their version of the birth story, including Mark, who doesn't have one at all. He doesn't talk about the birth of Jesus at all. And there's a reason for that, why he wouldn't have had to, because he's so vastly earlier than Matthew, Luke, or John. So he's writing to people who knew the dramatic stories. He doesn't have any post-resurrection appearances. He was writing to people who had been there to a great extent. What he was trying to do was say, you know the glamour spots, the high points. Let me fill in what happened between here and there. It's not how he got here, it's what he did once he was. And that's kind of aside. But then you get to Matthew, and he writes this very Joseph-centric birth story, because he is a Jewish Christian writing to a Jewish audience about a Jewish Messiah, and has to link Jesus to David and Abraham, and Joseph is the link. Luke, you get in there, he writes a very Mary-centric birth story, because he's writing to Gentiles and Romans who don't give a flip about being connected to Abraham or to David, but who feel like outsiders. So anyway, I start with, here's what was going on. And then John, he's writing in Greek, so his is all in your head, theological. I described that. Here's what was going on. How does it translate to us? What do any of these stories have to do with our lives and our world in this particular moment, facing our situations? It all probably was birthed by preparing for last year's ABC Christmas Eve special. And there was a little interest around that in, well, is there more stuff? And so just put together, and that was a very, it was something that really dealt with human pain, with loneliness, with illness, with the after effects of COVID, and with the fact that in one sense or another, we're all shepherds. We're all out in the darkness.
Yes. And this was just this past Christmas, right? 2021.
Yeah.
So this was a big ABC TV special. And were you the only one on it, or were there many special guests?
It was the Christmas Eve worship experience. The Interfaith Broadcast Commission produced it, and ABC carried it coast to coast. But it was filmed at High Point University. So I was the preacher of the evening. There were other liturgists and their music department, plus some additional musicians as well, Marcus Hammond and others. But it was...
was it fun to be on TV like that with this? It must have been a great experience.
Laura, I didn't think, once I left New York City, I didn't assume I'd ever have that opportunity again. And we used to do those at Marble, but it was because it was Marble. Mm-hmm. So whoever was the minister there, I knew that they wanted that great historic church. So I didn't assume I'd get to do another one. Therefore, I think it was, if anything, a little more special that suddenly I was asked, would you like to do one of these? When my first response was, I don't even have a church anymore. And they said, well, can you find a place? And all right, I'm teaching at this university and it's beautiful. And how about that? And it worked. It was fun. It was fun. I loved it. And I love hearing from people that I'll never meet across the country, particularly those who say, I felt like a shepherd, I lost a loved one, or I'm living in a retirement center or nursing home, or I've been dealing with illness and it found a little hope or something. That's a nice
thing. Yes. You reminded me of one time when we had lunch. It was at the Ace Hotel in Nomad in Manhattan. And you and I are sitting there, and sitting all by himself at a table, just a few feet away from us, is the late great Anthony Bourdain, of the wonderful chef who would travel all around the world. Parts Unknown or something? He had some incredible series of TV shows, and I said, oh my goodness, I would love to have him on my radio show. I was at WABC in New York at the time, and you were so great. You were like, go talk to him. You were encouraging me to not.
The worst they can say is no. Yeah. And I thought you should be honored to be on your show.
Well, you were so kind to think like that. And I'm just thinking that this poor soul just wants to eat his lunch. And the last thing he wants is someone coming up to the table. But you gave me the courage. So I went over there and I said, hi, Anthony, I'm so sorry to bother you. I adore your work and blah, blah, blah. I'm on WABC. I have a radio show. I was hoping maybe you could come on and talk about the new TV show or something. He couldn't have been nicer. He said, oh, absolutely. He said, let me give you my publicist's name, and here's her phone number and her email address, and call her. And as soon as she says I can do it, I'll do it for you. He was the nicest guy. And sadly, he left that week, I think, to start filming that show. And the rest is history. He spent the rest of the years taping all over in far-flung countries, and that most exquisite. I absolutely love that series, but I never did get to have him on. But I'll never forget saying hello to him, and it was you that gave me the courage. You are a motivational guy.
that restaurant, a wonderful little restaurant, is right across the street from my office. And that day with you and Anthony Bourdain, that's memorable. May I tell you another story from that restaurant? I'll make it brief.
Oh, sure. Love it.
Okay. I'm sitting at lunch one day with Marianne Williamson, and we're discussing what we do and speaking. And I'm saying, pretty soon I'm going to leave New York, and I won't be a minister of a church anymore, but I still want to be out on the circuit speaking. And I said, Marianne and I are pretty close to the same age. And I said, you know, what worries me is as I age, am I still going to be relevant, or will I be yesterday's news? Marianne said, you know, there's something that you get only by living long enough, and that's experience. And she said, if you properly interpret experience, it becomes wisdom. And she is just lovely but direct. I mean, whatever hits her head comes out of her mouth.
Yes.
She looked across the table at me and she said, now, if you want to go hide in a hole somewhere with your experience and your wisdom, that's up to you. As for me, she said, I think I'm going to run for president. And I laughed, and lo and behold, she did. I mean, next thing you know, there she is on the debate stage. But I've always thought about that advice in that moment. If you live long enough, you know, it's like the insurance commercial. We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. If you live long enough and pay attention, you learn a few things. And so you reach an age of saying, do I throw that all away and hide in a hole, like she said? Or do we try to use that to make life maybe a little better for other people? Even though I never did make the leap to say I'm going to run for president. But Marianne did.
She did. She absolutely did. I know her also. She is quite something. And she truly has, oh my gosh, she's a great talker also. I think I went to one of her talks one time and she spoke for 8 hours straight. She really just kept going, and she's got the wisdom too, and it's interesting stuff. But you know, I think that's a really good point. Aging is an interesting process that you don't think about it until you're like a few decades in, and then you go, I can either run with this, I can either try to get better and be the best version of myself, or I can start going into all that, well, you know, I'm getting old type of thing. And it really is perspective, which is you know, in some way people think maybe that's not spiritual, but I think it has everything to do with spirituality, how we see ourselves, and whether we're seeing ourselves, you know, kind of as a spiritual reflection or just kind of a body and a time machine that's, you know, whose time is going to be up anytime soon. So it really helps. Your life shouldn't end before your body does, you know? And there's that myth that you reach a point where you no longer have anything to offer. You're just taking up space. And that is hugely mythological. And even in recent history, as we read about the lives of people, tremendous impact, they're not all under 40, you know? That's right.
I mean, in the political realm, nowadays, you look at the ages of leaders in both parties, in entertainment, in literature, medicine. I read an article last week about people who retire and then choose to go back to work because after retiring for a short while, they feel like some big something is missing. And it was talking about CEOs and people like that who are out of the workforce for a short period of time and go back, and it was listing some of the things they do, which I found fascinating. Former attorneys, former physicians who are now driving trucks, 18-wheelers. And you ask them, why? You don't have to do that. They said, we want to work. We want to see an entirely different slice of life than we had. We want to do something new, but we want to do. We want to be out there. We want to be busy. We want to contribute. Why not? Live while you're alive.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I've been a student of Christian Science for many years, and the woman who founded it back when slavery was being abolished in the 1800s, she went on to live into her, Mary Baker Eddy, and she ended up living into her 90s, and she, at age 85, now this is a woman from the Victorian era who was basically seen as property to most men of that time, and here she founded a movement, a church, a metaphysical college. She did 100 different things in her life. And at age 85, she decided that the press was just not fair, that it wasn't honest, and she wanted to start a newspaper that would harm no person but bless all mankind. That's what she called it. It's called the Christian Science Monitor. It has won more Pulitzer Prizes than almost any newspaper. It's still in circulation today. It's an absolutely brilliant piece of journalism that continues on to this day. But she decided that at 85, well, there's not another good paper around. I think I need to start one. And I loved that mentality. Her whole thing was never count your age, just keep living at your life your fullest.
I saw a documentary, a news clip on TV recently. It was a 5-minute thing that a certain station does to lift up personalities that are of interest. And this particular day, they dealt with a physician in a small town, a town of about 800 people, so tiny little town, who has been practicing medicine there since the 1950s. He's 90 years old. He goes into his office 6 days a week. His daughter is his receptionist and files the insurance and things. And when they interviewed him, they said, "Are you ever going to retire?" And he's 90. He said, "Yeah, probably someday." And they said, "Why not before 90?" And he said, "I practice medicine. There's sick people in our community and I can make them well. Why would I walk away?" And it became really clear that he gets energy about it. He has fun doing it. It's his life. Arguably, I would say he may not have lived to 90 had he just decided to sit and watch the sun come up and go down. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but he invested himself in life to return his life.
And he's living his purpose. And you have that wonderful PBS series that you did, The Love Principle, 5 Steps to Loving and to a Loving and Purposeful Life. And that's another wonderful one as well. And I just encourage everybody. My guest is the wonderful Dr. Michael Brown. He's a minister, a preacher, a writer, a professor, a motivational speaker, and so much more. I would say a healer of the heart, mind, and spirit. He is my guest today on Easter Sunday because I wanted somebody who just lifted me up all many years ago in Manhattan at the Marble Collegiate Church. But still, every time I think of you, Dr. Michael Brown, I get that same beautiful feeling of just oneness in Christ and God and purpose and living life to its absolute most blessed, fullest point. And you do that, and you're a great example. Everyone should check you out. Do you have a website people can go to find you, or should they just Google you?
I do, actually. It's drmichaelbbrown.com. www.
And is it DR, doctor? Yeah, doctor.
DR. MICHAELBBROWN. So if you leave out the middle B, you get somebody else. There is another Dr. Michael Brown who is
a hypnotist or something.
Well, he's in ministry. He's very popular, but he's I think very political, and he and I are not. We don't play
person.
The same ball field at all.
That is correct. So when you go to find his website, it's Dr. Michael B. Brown, Michael letter B, Brown.com.
There you
Dr.
go.
Brown, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for being here, and
Laura,
God bless you and your family.
It was always a joy, and I hope you will have a happy, happy Easter, and all the resurrection goodness will rise up for you today and your listeners.
And you as well. I thank you for that.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Way Home with Laura Smith. Here's Laura.
Well, I am so excited to have somebody back on my program who, over Christmas time, wrote a book that made it not only to the New York Times bestseller list, but also to Amazon's bestseller list, Barnes & Noble's, USA Today, you name it. And it must be because maybe there's actually a hunger for real, true stories, beautiful stories, stories with content that uplifts one's spirit and one's soul. He is a Fox News contributor. He's also the host of the World Over Live on EWTN, which is the Global Catholic Network. And I am just so grateful to have him back. He's one of my favorite commentators in the whole wide world. I don't know if he knows that. Raymond Arroyo, thank you so much for being back on The Way Home.
Laura, delighted to be here.
I loved so much The Spider Who Saved Christmas, a beautiful, beautiful picture book. Was, I guess, the first installment in what you're calling your Legend series. It's for old and young alike, a picture book, though, that is just unparalleled with the most beautiful pictures in the world. Well, since that made it all the way, to the bestseller list of all of them, you have a second one that just dropped. Beautiful, another book, The Thief Who Stole Heaven. Raymond, it's gorgeous. I love this one too. I was wondering, which one do I like better? Hard to tell. So tell us a little bit first about the Legend series, and then about the Thief Who Stole Heaven. I think the story is incredible.
Well, they sort of fit together, the Spider book and this new Thief Who Stole Heaven, because in some ways, the Thief Who Stole Heaven is a prequel to the Spider book, because if you notice, even in the illustrations in the book, it's the same illustrator, a fellow named Randy Gallegos. And Randy and I were very determined that Mary, Joseph, the baby Jesus that you see in this book look exactly as they did in the Spider book. And this is basically what happens as the Holy Family leaves Bethlehem on their way to Egypt. And, it's really technically not a legend. This is the origin story of Dismas, the good thief. And we all hear about this thief. We remember him hanging on the cross next to Jesus, but nobody knows anything about him. Well, I stumbled across St. Augustine, John Chrysostom, Gregory the Great. All these church fathers and historians had written about Dismas and his backstory. And when I read it, I thought, why haven't I ever come across this tale anywhere? And it turns out, and I don't want to ruin the story, but I'll tease it a little bit, that this thief may have met Jesus much earlier, when Jesus was but a newborn child, and how that little moment in his history may have shaped what eventually becomes this great act on Good Friday. St. Augustine says Dismas, the good thief, may be the evangelist of Calvary, and that he's the first story of Easter, which we don't often think about, Laura. This is the guy, not the apostles, not the saints. It is this common thief, this murderer, who is the first guy who burst through the gates of heaven. And I thought somehow this story had to be told. And originally I was going to tell it in a little novella, like a little chapter book. But when I started thinking about the best platform for this particular tale, I wanted it to be a family read. And that's really what I consider all of these books. I consider them family reads, not children's books or kids' books, because what I've discovered is, and I saw it with The Spider and I see it with the audience for The Thief Who Stole Heaven, grandmothers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, moms, and dads will read it with their children, and they both come to their own understandings and questions, and that interplay is what I'm really looking for, that conversation. And had I written this as a chapter book, we wouldn't have that family conversation. So these are all family reads in my mind, and the perfect message for Easter, that hope never fails and mercy is eternal till the very end of your life.
I always, that part of the story of Easter and the crucifixion, and what happened to Jesus with the two thieves on either side of him. Now, you say the good thief, right? Because there was a second thief who was on the other side, who when he heard Dismas say to Jesus, have mercy on me, and wanting to go into heaven with him or whatever. And the bad thief was like, what are you, crazy? You're not going anywhere, like heaven, basically. And that to me was one of the most touching, amazing things. And then when Jesus goes on to say, forgive them for they know not what they do. That is something that I think is probably in a nutshell, the Christian message, and has always, it's been such a challenge, I think about, where I am in my spiritual growth. And I think often to that moment up on Calvary. And so that you've put it into this story this way, like you said, family discussion. Now, this leads me, Raymond, because I listen to you all the time on Fox News. Your commentaries are just exquisitely done. I mean, you're not like a regular old news announcer. You're a true artist. Your gift of language is so beautiful, and your funny sense of humor. And I just wondered about you this week, thinking, regardless of how cancel culture seems to be happening in this country, the real hunger is for these uplifting stories, things that bring people and human beings together, correct or not?
Well, look, Laura, I think the good, the beautiful, the true, people still crave. And all of my stories, look, these family reads anyway, these are traditional stories that I've put a new sheen on, that I've interpreted or approached in a new way. And I see all of this as just, look, we're all writing the same story. We're writing one story, and it's the story of redemption, good versus evil. That's what every story I've ever written is about on some level. And certainly this book, this is about the war. The Thief Who Stole Heaven is about a guy who kind of, one of the reviewers said he's like Aladdin meets the Chosen. He's a swashbuckling thief, a robber, kind of dashing. Kids love this pirate ideal, so it appeals to them on that level. But then they encounter this guy as a young child. He's brought into this tribe of thieves and taught how to rob on the highways of Judea. And what we see is this guy making really bad decisions and where it takes his life. But in the middle of that, in the midst of that, he has this brush with grace. He has this encounter with the Christ child. And the seed that plants, that doesn't really blossom till the end of his life, I thought was a tale worth telling. And part of what I'm trying to do with the Spider series, with the Spider book, with the Thief Who Stole Heaven, we go through the motions, Laura, during these holidays. And we kind of, here comes the egg and bunny season, and then people move on. Here comes Santa Claus, and you move on. I'm forcing people or wanting families to stop for a moment and consider, what is this time really about? And what are the roots of this holiday? And I've tried to touch on both of them in these two books. And this book, The Thief Who Stole Heaven, is really, I think of it as an arc, a bridge between Christmas and Easter. And if we immerse ourselves in the true, the beautiful, and the good, and revive the roots of what we stand on and the roots of these holidays, that is how you perpetuate a healthy and a good culture. And then you don't have to worry about Cardi B and what she's doing at the Grammys. Nobody watched the Grammys. They're down 55%, 58% from the abysmal ratings of last year. But that's when you put music behind social conditioning and politics, and frankly, gratuitous displays that I don't even want to call to mind here. That's the rapper who stole the culture is going to be the name of that book. But it's a very dark depiction of humanity, and it's angry, it's divisive, it's nasty. And I don't think it's what anyone wants for our children or even for ourselves. And so I try to create works that are entertaining, uplifting, creative, invite a sense of awe, and remind us of the reality that we really occupy. And that's one where good and evil are vying for you and for your families. And hope never fails, and it's never too late. I had a letter the other day, the child of a prisoner, who told me, what this book meant to them, because for the first time, this little boy understood that his father wasn't lost and gone from him forever, and that grace was there. There was hope there, and that God didn't abandon him or his father. Mm-hmm. And that's really, that child kind of captured exactly what I hope to convey in this book. Which is
you cut out just for a second there, Raymond. Yeah. You said this a child read your book, and he had a father who was in prison. Did you say?
Yes.
Okay.
A friend of mine who's in prison ministry got a copy of the book to this child, and it just helped them kind of, they're in a very obviously very different situation than you or I, but it helped them put together, and the father as well, this idea that they weren't lost, and the child could understand, here's someone who's in the situation my father's in, and yet God's glance doesn't turn away from them. God never abandons, and his glance, which is a big theme in this book, stays on this individual. And all of us, sin doesn't invalidate grace or what you were built for. It's an impediment to it, but it's not an obstacle for God.
I'm excited to know the Thief That Stole Heaven, first of all, is already out, correct?
Yes, it just
March
came
9th
out last week.
So people can find The Thief Who Stole Heaven and, of course, The Spider Who Saved Christmas as well on Amazon and anywhere where fine books are sold, online or in stores. Raymond, since you said this is the second installment, I'm going to assume there's a third?
We'll see. I'm looking. I'm always on the lookout for a new perspective, a new on-ramp to these stories we know. But the thing that I loved about this is I like to take things that you think you know, and I do this in my on-air work as well. I mean, this is what I do in my TV interviews. I bring you people that you think you know. We sit down, and in the course of that interview, you learn things about them or have a new perspective on them that you never did. And that's really what I'm trying to do here. But this is the origin of the good thief. This is what made him good. And we don't often think about that and that journey that he went on. But there's a lot of historical evidence, Peter Damian, John Chrysostom, and others who've written about the backstory of this good thief, of Dismas. And I thought, if we could somehow capture this, the first person to celebrate Easter, and that really is who Dismas ends up being.
Yeah, that gives me chills.
I wanted to save the holiday from bunnies and eggs, as nice and sweet as those are. This is another way for families and kids to appreciate why we have bunnies and eggs and those pastel colors and Easter baskets. This is why, to celebrate this moment. And it's a big one. It's an important one.
It is. And it normally, when people veer towards more of the spiritual aspect of the holiday, it's mostly about the crucifixion and the resurrection, of course. But I love that you picked out this particular aspect of it that maybe we haven't thought about for a long time, or maybe didn't know there was a little more to the story. That's what you seem to have a gift at doing, Raymond Arroyo. So I can't wait for your next one, because, if you think about it, every one of those, there's so many stories in the Bible that are probably worth embellishing on and finding out even more into them. And I'm sure there's hundreds of them. I just hope that you just keep dropping these books every couple of months. I just think it's what the world needs now. And again, those illustrations are I think in your press release, it says something about they're cinematic almost. Yeah. And it's true. When you look at them, you feel like you're looking at a movie-scape. They're just, the colors are so vibrant. It just reminds me of when I was little and we had those big picture books, and that your whole world, was right there in front of
kids, you. Children are very visual, and people are visual today. And, a big book commitment they're not going to make, but they will read a picture book together and go dive into it as one. And I think Randy did a wonderful job here. We were very deliberate in using color, in using and there are a lot of Easter eggs in this book. No pun intended. Little hidden illustrations, the use of light in the background of this book. So you are, I guess, on a subconscious level, you're taking in the vibrancy and brightness of this young boy, and then you see the darkness move in and overwhelm him, overtake him, and then the lights come back on at the end. And that's all of our stories. That I think touches all of us in some way. So we wanted it to be a visual adventure, and it is an adventure for kids, but he's a character that we know about but don't spend any time on. And I love just, when I'm working on these books, doing research, you're not only are you learning a lot, you're immersing yourself, you're marinating in these stories. And when you think about it, Dismas, the good thief, aside from Mary, is maybe the only person who witnesses the child Jesus at the beginning of his life and is there for the crucifixion at the end. Mm-hmm. He's the only person that bridges that gap. And we just don't think about that. And maybe we should.
Yes, absolutely. I encourage everybody to do that. And not only with the equal to the beautiful pictures is the beautiful language in which you write. Raymond, you have a way of speaking when you're on TV, whether you're being funny or whether you're writing a book, that it kind of throws me back to a little bit more classic, traditional, maybe even eloquent in spots. You have a way of painting with your beautiful words, and and language, I think, is just so important. It's something I think children need to be taught, the beautiful gift of language, and you've done that so beautifully. I still say, like I said in my last show with you, I want you to try out for the Jeopardy role.
I remember that. Well,
I'm serious.
I was trained as an actor, and my favorite actors were always Laurence Olivier, whom I met when I was very young, Frank Langella, Christopher Plummer, who we just lost. I always had a preference for those actors who were eloquent and had spent the time to think through. And if you notice, none of those men had disastrous public lives, as so many today do. So that, and growing up on television, my favorites were always Johnny Carson, Regis Philbin, a guy named Tom Schneider, all of whom had a little elegance about the way they conducted their broadcast life. And so that's what I grew up in. That's what who I spent time watching and whom I loved. So naturally, I want to extend that tradition. And I do feel I'm a little bit a part of that.
You absolutely are.
Long-form television interviews are a thing of the past. And real humor that is not cruel is a rarity on TV as well. So,
and you have it. I'm often laughing at your things. I can't believe how you twist something around at the last second, and you turn something that could be very serious into something more light and very, very funny. You have just really, you are all that and then some. I thank you, Raymond Arroyo, for coming on The Way Home again. And I just want to remind everyone, the thief, say that 3 times, The Thief Who Stole Heaven has just come out last week. You can get it anywhere where fine books are sold, Amazon and all of them. And Raymond Arroyo, you can catch him on Fox News on a daily basis and on EWTN, the Catholic Network, the Global Catholic Network, on his show, The World Over Live. Raymond Arroyo, thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank
what a
you
joy
for
to be with you.
blessing
Happy
of
Easter.
Happy Easter to you, too. And thanks again for the wonderful book. And I appreciate it. Well, have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Great. You too. Thank you.
You're listening to The Way Home. We'll be right back.
Hi, here's a minute of purpose, improving your life 60 seconds at a time. Walking is one of the best and easiest things you can do for your health. It reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, and does much more. But admit it can get a little boring. So here are some fun ways to kick it up a notch. There are great apps like News in Slow French or Coffee Break Chinese that will help you learn a new language. GreatCoursesPlus.com features top-shelf lectures about things like opera or history. BrainHQ.com has lots of fun games to try on your walk so you'll get smarter and healthier. You can make your walk more fun by adopting a dog. Temporarily, senior centers can hook you up with an older person who might not be able to give their pooch the exercise it needs. So next time you step out, bring along one of these fun partners and get more from your daily walk. This has been your Minute of Purpose. Find more now at nowwithpurpose.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Way Home with Laura Smith. Here's Laura.
Well, I'm so grateful to all of you who are tuned in on this Easter Sunday. Maybe you're just leaving church. Maybe you're on your way to your mom's or your parents or your children's homes for a lovely Easter dinner and maybe even a little egg hunt. But today, my normal guru of good news, Jim Cleefield, is normally here with great uplifting stories, the good news point of the show. But being on a holiday, he is taking the Sunday off. So I have my most wonderful engineer who's been with me for, a long time. And, you're good news just yourself, Bob Small. You're always good news to me because you always put this show together. You do it with kindness and expertise. And I'm always so grateful for you. So thank you for being here on Easter Sunday.
I don't know what else to say. That was wonderful. Thank you. And happy Easter to you.
Thank you so much. I just love this day. It means so much. It's a time for real reflection. I know that you ring the bells in the church. As I was telling Dr. Michael Brown after we finished the show, you ring the bells is it the First Congregational Church in Greenwich, Connecticut?
That's right.
Yeah. There's something about that, the tinkling of the bell, and it really can. They talk about sound being an actual healing force, and I think when I hear a bell or a chime, it can really take you. When you hear those wind chimes in the wind, they can take your heart and your soul, and you just kind of feel like you're going to another place. So I think that you ring the bells is actually, you're doing something very healing when you're doing it. I think you must get back to it.
Yeah, it reminds me of how I felt the first time I heard them. I thought it was a wonderful experience, a wonderful sound.
It truly is. And that's what we need is beautiful sounds in the world. And so I am so grateful to be with you today. Next week, we'll be back with Jim Clefield giving us his good news stories. But to all of you who are listening today, once again, I wish you a very, very happy Easter and a beautiful day with your families. I'm so grateful for the family here of Balance of Nature. That family, they're an actual family. And I spend a lot of time with them, and I know that they're all together and all in church today as well, but out in Utah. And so I just thank all of you listening to the program, To the Way Home with Laura Smith. It gives me great joy to bring you guests like Dr. Michael Brown and people with interesting, fascinating messages and stories to tell. So thank you for joining us every single week. As I said, happy Easter. And Bob Small, thank you so much for putting this all together.
My pleasure. Happy Easter to you.
This is The Way Home. I'm Laura Smith. See you next time.
Podcasts by Federated Media.